Good morning. It's great to see everybody here with us. If you're a visitor with us, you are our honored guest, and we're so pleased that you have chosen to be with us this morning. We hope that you hang out and let us get to know you better before you leave. You know, there's a talent among students, regardless of age, and that is the talent to seek out how best to get the teacher off track. To throw out those random questions just to try to, even if it would be just a 5-minute break, you know, just to take a little break and to get them off track. You know, for example, when I was in preaching school, we had Dr. Bill. Now, Dr. Bill is quite literally one of the smartest guys I have ever known in my life. He has 2 doctorates. He wasn't happy with one. He wanted 2. He has one in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. You know, by the time I was in school, I started school in the fall of 2001. By the time I was there, he's already been preaching for 50 years. I mean, for goodness sakes. He was in his upper 70s, and he was still going all over the state and all over the country, doing lessons all over the place. But the thing about Dr. Bill was that he loved baseball, and he loved his Texas Rangers. And so it was in a day, we're doing general Bible overview, or biblical lens, I think it was called, and our classes were 3 hours at a shot. You know, we got a break after every hour, but it was still, you're in one class, a single class for 3 hours. And so, you know, there was times you get tired of writing, you know. And so someone just threw out, you know, he's talking about Moses. And someone said, Dr. Bill, what do you think of the Rangers pitching options this year? 15-minute break. Dr. Bill started preaching on the Texas Ranger bullpen. Awesome. You know, I threw that question out on Facebook. You know, if you're a teacher, you know, what were some off-the-ball questions that you received? The best one I got was Tim Watkins. Tim Watkins, in case you don't know, he directs choir at Sherryland High School. And he wrote back and he said, I was teaching choir one day, and we're going over a song, and then this hand shoots up from a boy in his class, and he says, how can I complete this witchcraft spell? We're in choir. He's trying to conduct black magic out of his Wicca handbook that he had with him on his person. Tim told me later he used to always call this kid the heathen. You know, but you know, these questions that get thrown out that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, but sometimes, you know, they go up. I have something I want to ask, or I have something I want to get off my chest. And you know, to an unseasoned teacher, you know, it can be a total derailer for, you know, either for the whole day or for at least the next few minutes, and you're off chasing a rabbit. But you know, this stuff happened to Jesus too. I mean, flip over to Luke 12. Luke 12. You know, this morning we're doing the parable of the rich fool, which is what we talked about in VBS this past Tuesday that Dale mentioned earlier. But you know, the thing about Luke 12 is that if this is going, because sometimes in the Gospels time can be relative. But if the time that we're talking about here in Luke 12, if this is actually linear time, it's an interesting thing that happens. You start with the beginning of Luke 12, and you know, you have a crowd of thousands of people coming to hear Jesus talk. You know, and Jesus is speaking first to His disciples, and He's talking about very important stuff. He's talking to them about watching out for the Pharisees and the Sadducees. This is important stuff. Watch out for your false teachers. Watch out for those who try to mistreat you. He also talks about not being afraid of those who kill the body. Again, you know, be afraid of the one who can kill the soul and the body both. You know, be more loyal to God than you are to man. And then he starts talking to them about, you know, if whoever acknowledges me before God, I will also acknowledge him. Also very important. And then he wraps it up as, when you do get in trouble and you're hauled in before the synagogue, don't worry. The Holy Spirit will teach you what to say. So we get this section that's talking about Pharisees and Sadducees, the trouble that they can get you into. being strong enough to stand more for God than you do for man, and not to worry about it in case you do get in trouble and hauled before the Sanhedrin. Don't fret this stuff. Okay, you might be asking, what does any of this have to do with sharing or the parable of the rich fool? And the answer would be nothing. Not a blessed thing. So how do we get on the subject? Because we had somebody do I got something I want to ask situation. While this is happening, and this is where we pick it up in verse 13. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." That's it. I have not met a Christian one who has not wished that they could have seen Jesus when He walked the face of the earth. To have the chance. Okay, if you think about it, if you had the chance to say something or ask something of Jesus to His face, what would you ask? What would you say? You had a chance, one chance, for a one-on-one, a very brief one-on-one with Jesus. What would you say? What would be on your mind? Because Jesus was only around for 3 years, very limited time. What would you say? This guy, now did he know Jesus was only going to be around for 3 years? Absolutely not. But he gets recorded in history because he takes his moment with Jesus to not even ask a question so much as to make a demand. "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." That's it. So now why would he do this? Okay, now it was common. This was a common practice. If people had issues, they would take it to a rabbi. If some Jews had some troubles, they would go to a rabbi, present the problem, let the rabbi judge between them, and then whatever the rabbi says, okay, we got to do it now. And so him doing this, it shows us that he felt that Jesus was a great moral teacher, that he was a rabbi, he was a good rabbi, someone who's worth listening to, someone whose advice is worth following. So he's going to take it to Jesus. But as Jesus is in the habit of doing, He doesn't just answer the question or answer the request of face value. He dives into the deeper heart of the matter. Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Whereas any other rabbi said, okay, let me see the situation. Okay, you have two brothers and you have an inheritance. And the inheritance doesn't just go to one son. The inheritance needs to go to two. 2/3 to the older son and then the remaining third to the rest of the male siblings. Okay, if you're not doing it, do it. And there you go. Life can carry on. But that's not what Jesus does. Jesus asks the man, "Why are you bringing me into this? Who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Why are we talking about this? Why are we discussing this? Why? Because there are so much more important things to be discussing. Also, the man, even though he's the one who's getting the raw deal in this by not having the inheritance being shared with him, he is still showing us and showing Jesus his heart. In verse 15 it says, "Then he said to them, 'Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.'" The man who brought this before Jesus is the one who's getting shorthanded by his brother. But still, Jesus is telling all of us, watch out for all types of greed. Because what we have does not make who we are. And also, this teaching is very similar to the love of money. The love of money being the root to all kinds of evil. Part of us can be tempted to say, oh, that's only something that the wealthy need to watch out for. No. Somebody can be the poorest person on the face of the planet and have a love of money. It is for all of us to watch out for the love of money. Regardless of how much or how little of it we have, we can still have a love of it. And it's the same thing with greed. We can have everything in the world, or we might not have anything on the face of the planet, but we can still be subject to the dangers of greed. This brother's being ripped off. But he's showing us he is following down the track to greed. Because of taking this opportunity to being able to see and listen and hear Jesus. He's more concerned with his brother ripping him off. And it's bugging him so much that he's missing out on the opportunity and the life that is around him, and instead dwelling on his greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Do we recognize this? I remember when I was in high school, and you had to have the shoes. You had to have the clothes. You had to have the hairstyle. These days, I'm just glad I have hair. I have a lot of hair, but remember back in these periods of times in our lives where it seemed like everything, you had to have the right car. We didn't have cell phones to brag about, so you had to have the right pager. Or how many pagers you had. You remember that? That was a look when in Southeast Dallas, that was a look. You would wear suspenders, see, and you would just clip them on both sides. And, you look. It was like something out of a Western movie. Instead of bullets, they were pagers. Yeah. But remember, it was all about the stuff that you had to have in order to make you look cool. But you think back, and it's like, goodness sakes, how much money did I waste on an image? Because we thought back when we were younger that all that was needed for me to be somebody. And that the stuff, the Air Jordans, which were really starting to hit their stride at that period of time, that you had to have those in order to be somebody. And things like honor, and discipline, and love, and service, morals, and all the great things of life were not as important as what we could have or deck ourselves out in order to make us somebody. And we were foolish to think that what we have could actually have an impact into what we are. Oh, it does. But from a negative side. Not a positive. And in order to get this point across, Jesus told a little story. He said, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Okay, let's stop right there. You have a man, and he has land. And his land produces an awesome crop. This means he is now wealthy. He has food. He has more food than he has ever had before. He is a farmer, so he has barns. And he starts to go out and to harvest. And as he starts to bring in the food that his ground has now produced, his barns run out of room. What do we do? I have no more room in my barns. Who's going to have my food if I don't have room in my barns? I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my perfectly good barns and build bigger, better ones. And then, as we reread this paragraph, try to keep track of the personal pronouns. He thought to himself, what shall I do?
I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." My. It's all about my. It's all about I. He was having a party with his 3 favorite people, me, myself, and I. It was all about what he could do in order to establish himself into a life of comfort. Now, before we go on any further, when we have times like this, it's important, because some people try to pull it out and ask the question, is there wrong with having wealth? Or is there wrong with having lots of stuff? And the answer is no. When Jesus talks about wealth, or when Jesus talks about possession, when Jesus talks about greed and He talks about selfishness, it's not about a dollar amount. After you reach this marker and wealth, anything above that, that's just greed, and you shouldn't do that. That's not how Jesus operates. All these lessons always centered around the heart. How is all this affecting us personally, affecting our spirit? And is it corrupting us on the inside? Because what we are on the inside will become us on the outside. And if our possessions and our quest for possession, our quest for greed is corrupting us on the inside, this is the problem. But just the fact that we might have more than somebody else, does that make us an evil person? No. But how is it affecting us? Is our mind always linked to our possessions? And do we look to our possessions for our identity? Those are the important questions that we need to ask ourselves. This guy, it was his land. It was his crops. And he could do whatever he wanted with them. But his problem was that everything was focused inward. Everything was focused on himself. And like Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, he was more worried about his possessions on earth, where moth and rust can destroy, instead of focusing on heaven, where he could have treasure where moth and rust does not destroy and where thieves cannot break in and steal. Everything was focused on the here and now. And that does not do us any good. If we start focusing on self and on our comfort and what I can have, we're not looking around to our fellow man. Everything is turned inward. And all that stuff that we think makes us something is worthless. After all, we don't get to take it with us. In verse 20 it says, "But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you.'" I'm getting to it. But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then," watch this, "then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" How long is your life going to be? When are you going to drop dead? I see, I don't want to see any wives looking at husbands, tick tock, tick tock. I had a wife. I heard an older couple say once in New Mexico. He said, "Jerry Anderson, I could just kill you." I said, "Leon, do I need to set a time in my calendar that I need to do a funeral?" But honestly, when are we going to drop dead? When's it going to happen? When are you going to draw your last breath? You don't know, do you? It could be many years from now. It could be in the next 5 minutes. In case it is in the next 5 minutes, at least we have a doctor in the house. But we don't know when it's going to happen. Are we preparing for our life or for our next life? This guy was so focused on now. And he had everything figured out for now. He had enough to be able to live the next several years off what he had now. But then God calls him and He says, "You don't have many years. you're going to die tonight. Then all that preparation, all that food, all that wealth, his new barns, all of that's going to go to somebody else. And it won't even be his to enjoy anymore. And he wasn't ready. He was not ready. We might be, when we look at parables of Jesus, we try to distance ourselves from them. We try to say, that was then. We don't do that these days. Do we think we don't act like this today? Does your attic look like this? How about your basement? How about your garage? And we might even say to ourselves, I have never built a barn in my life. You know what? Many people don't build barns anymore, but we sure rent them, don't we? Yeah. Oh, man. The preacher's stepping on toes. It's embarrassing, isn't it? I remember when we moved down here from Oklahoma, we got a rental truck. It was trying to order a rental truck in the middle of an ice storm. I know what happens down here all the time. But it was a pain in the neck because power was coming in and out. We had to go to Hugo, Oklahoma, which is 20 miles away from where we lived, and the streets were still kind of icy, and again, that whole area was just swamped by this ice storm, so power's coming in and out. It took, no joke, it took 3 hours to get a moving truck, because by the time it gets to the final, okay, I'm going to push this and you'll have your truck, power goes out. And then when the power came back on, we had to start completely over. It was just a complete aneurysm. But, so we were just pleased to get something with wheels and a storage space. But the truck we got was too small. And so we had to leave that. We left, I'm not going to say we left tons behind, but we left a good, if you were to make like a 4-foot square or 5-foot square of stuff that we just left behind, there were some things that when we moved from New Mexico a year and a half before, we never opened. You ever done that? You ever moved somewhere, and you realize that you have boxes that you can move and put on the truck that you haven't opened from the last move you had? And that stuff we left behind? Outside of the marriage, the wedding portrait that's in our living room, if you've been to our house, we accidentally left that behind. But we got that back. But besides that, we haven't missed a single thing that we left behind. Nothing. Not a thing. Why do we have it? Why did we think it was so important? We have to move it from that garage so we can put it in this garage. But again, this is not about stuff. It's not about stuff. None of this is about stuff. It's about why we think we need it. Or it's about, is my life driven towards it? Why we need to put all our old stuff away into our garages, our attics, and our basements, and our storage units so that we can go out and get new stuff because we think this will complete me. This is the issue. As Jesus will say in his final line in this parable, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich towards God. What makes us as people? When I go and visit people in their homes, I don't go and make a mental catalog of the brands and labels that you have in your home. Hopefully you don't do that for us, or you'll be very disappointed. But that's not the point of it. We have stuff in the world so that we can use it to better serve people. What I have and what I own does not make me as a person. It's my God that gives value to who I am. That's most important. And if we miss out on that little tidbit, we have missed the entire ballgame. Because we can get into the rat race. This is why following of Christ gives freedom. We seek to follow Christ instead of following the trends of the world, and that releases us from being in the rat race, from needing to have the new cool stuff, from needing to have all the traps that the world says, you need this. No, I don't. The world doesn't dictate to me what I need. I need God. Everything else besides that is not mandatory. But my possession should be used first and foremost to give glory to God. I heard a preacher say that once. With every purchase that we ever make in life, do we ask the question, will this be used, or how can I use this to better serve the kingdom of God? Because, speaking of questions, I can throw you some interesting questions that I've heard preachers get asked. Preacher, does God want me to own a Dodge or a Chevy? What brand of mustard do I need to have in order to please God? Look and see if they have a Hebrew National. I don't know. But besides that, God don't care. But how can it be used in order to bring service to the kingdom? We are not our stuff. Our possessions do not make us. We are supposed to love people and use things, not love things and use people. And so when this guy asked this question, or made this demand, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me, that was greed. It was greed on his part, because in focusing about what his brother was doing to him, he was missing out on Jesus. And if we are living lives in which we are questing for things, is that quest for stuff making us miss out on Jesus? And if it is, we are being rich fools, trying to store up something for ourselves that we will not have forever. Preacher said one time, I have never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. Until he did. Because the hearse was the family vehicle and they were moving to a new house. So he had to change the statement to, I've never seen a U-Haul in a cemetery. Please remember, we can't take it with us. We're not going to have it forever. It's not going to last forever. And it doesn't make us as people. Let us be people who seek after the greater things in life. May we be people who instead of follow the stores and follow the ads and follow the coupons, we follow the Son. This morning we'd like to offer the invitation to those of you who might be hurting, who might be missing out. Maybe you feel like you've gotten caught up into the trap of commercialism and the trap of seeking after stuff, and you wish to change your path. We would love to help you. We'd love to pray with you. We would love to befriend you. We'd love to help you, show you how there is something better out there than what can be had at your local Walmart. Maybe you've lived your life and you have not taken that step to have your sins washed away, to be cleansed from those things in life which separate us from God. We would love to assist you with that this morning. But whatever needs you have, would you please come down as we stand and as we sing. Good morning. It's great to see everybody here with us. If you're a visitor with us, you are our honored guest, and we're so pleased that you have chosen to be with us this morning. We hope that you hang out and let us get to know you